My name is Eddy Benoit Jr., founder and CEO of the Benoit Group, and this is Shape the Deal. We will discuss some of the secrets and strategies in the real estate process that will help you shape your next deal. Hey guys, so good to have you here today on Shape the Deal. This is going to be a very interesting show. I mean, you guys definitely have a lot of experience in the business, and I'm so happy that you joined us this morning. This is Jim Izzo with the 1220 Group out of Miami. Then we have my buddy here, Jeff Lawrence. He's the managing partner with Berkadia in the affordable housing division. So I welcome you guys here to Shape the Deal, our new show. We have a lot of interesting things to talk about today, but the main focus is today is to talk about the due diligence process, which most people try to just skirt real quickly because they're so quick to move forward with the deal and get the deal out of the ground. And they think they have the best deal since sliced bread and can nothing stop this project. Somebody told me early on, most deals die 3 or 4 times before they actually, get to closing. Right. I've seen my deals die many deaths, even prior to the closing because of some due diligence related issues. So I'm just so happy to have you guys here today where you can share, some knowledge with our audience related to the due diligence process, which is so critical. Most people don't talk about the mistakes that they've made in this business. They only talk about how much money they've made, or a lot of the aspiring developers, whether young, old, looking at changing their careers, just think about, hey, I get in real estate development, I'm gonna make a lot of money. Yeah. They don't think about the risk involved in this business and the mistakes that are made and how costly they are. Just share with us, what was one of the biggest mistakes you made early on in your career, Jim?
I can tell you, I know exactly when it was. Mm-hmm. I worked for a larger firm, and one of the big partners sent me into a meeting, and I thought we had the deal locked up. He said, just go over there, hang out at the meeting, sign a few papers, it'd be fine. All unknown to me, the big guy from the other side showed up, and he looked at me and he said, "Sonny, we ain't got a deal." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I'm not ready to sign these papers." So we lost the deal, and I don't know why, but I was the sacrificial lamb, but I didn't have enough confidence to stand up and say, "No, we got a deal." We had already been done. So I went back to the office, and the partner that sent me over there, he said, "Sometimes you got to lose them to get them."
That's right.
And so ultimately, I think we got a better deal down the line, but I had to be a sacrificial lamb and learned about confidence and standing up to some people.
I mean, some of the best deals I've done, I never actually broke ground on them. Sometimes it is more advantageous to walk away from the deal as opposed to pushing forward. As I say in our organization all the time, real estate 101, don't fall in love with any particular deal.
That's right.
Never fall in love with one particular deal. Sometimes you have to be willing to walk away. And that can save you a lot of money as opposed to having that ego and feeling as though just because you love that deal, you have to plow forward. So Jeff.
So as a lender, the first thing they teach you when you start underwriting in credit school, they say, there's 3 C's when you're talking about credit. And this actually goes back to due diligence. Mm-hmm. So there is collateral, which is the asset, the location, all of that cash flow. That's your, obviously what you're underwriting, what you think you're going to be making on a deal, the income and the expenses. And then the last and most important piece is character. Yes. Those 3 C's, if you are not hitting the mark on all 3 of them, but more importantly, that last one, and I say the last one because it's the most important. So it speaks to my mistake. So biggest mistake I've made in my career, trying to develop a relationship, because I'm not a developer. My job is to help my clients get their deals financed or refinanced, to put them in a better financial position. Mm-hmm. And I was working with a broker who brought a deal to me. And he said, "Oh, this is a great client." And I wanted to do deals with this guy. I hadn't done any deals. He was a big originator of deals. He brought us a lot of business. And he brings us this deal, this client, and he said, oh, this guy's a great client. Well, unbeknownst to me, he really hadn't done a deal with him.
Wow.
Okay? He's telling me he has this great relationship with him. I fall in love with wanting to do more deals with this guy, and I'm taking my eye off the ball. So I'm hitting a couple of the 2Cs. The bottom line is that guy ended up not making the first payment on the loan, on the $15 million loan that we made to him. First and only time it's ever happened to me in my career. So I can't ignore those 3 Cs.
Well, that is so interesting that you say that, because the character part is one of the areas that most developers, young and even what's considered experienced developers, don't even think about. Right. As far as the lending institutions or even the capital investors, just underwriting the character of the sponsorship, the developer, who's in charge. How will you act when there's a problem on this project? How have you acted on other projects? Okay, have nothing to do with this. This is a very, 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 large industry, but at the same time, it can get very small when it comes to reputation and references. People will make a few phone calls, and before you know it, as developers, we'll tell you the truth really quick, especially if it's something that we had, somebody that we had displeasure with. As you know, there's a lot of, we've seen, a few cycles in this business. I came in right around the recession of the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s in the business. So for me, I was getting paid. I was a poor college student that now had a job, and I was like, what recession? I mean, I get paid every 2 weeks. This is the most money I ever had. So, but there was a lot of lessons learned for me with a lot of the developers that had gone through the, the recession of the late 80s.
One of the things that gets me excited about what I do, I made a conscious decision 15 years ago to focus on affordable housing, right? And I'm sharing with Jim before we taped, is that at this stage in my career, I'm very focused on, I want to do well, but I want to do good as well. So by focusing on affordable housing, what I'm able to do is, I'm able to do well for my family, but I'm able to do good by folks that live in communities, not only here in Atlanta. Fortunately for my job takes me to Chicago, it takes me to the Northeast. So that's what keeps me excited about what I do.
Right. How about you, Joe?
You got to have use your brain, and you got to have heart. And in this business, being a developer, you need your brain to resolve a lot of solutions and things like that when you get into tough situations, and that stimulates me every day, because I think there's another thing I got to get done. And your heart is you meet so many people, and there's a lot of different people that you meet along the way, politicians or families or corporate CEOs, and you got to be able to empathize with them all and still keep your head about you to stay straight. So I don't look at my watch when I'm doing this job or this career, and I don't think it's a job or a career. I think it's a passion.
For me, it's been a function of the fact that every day is different. And that's been the constant in this business for me. I wake up every day. It doesn't matter how bad the day before was. I knew that I had an opportunity today to either resolve it, or it's going to be something different, or it may resolve itself. We get to effectuate change, and we're able to go into these urban and suburban areas that are going through a transitioning, process, whether it's through gentrification or the fact that there's a sprawl that's taking place, and it's becoming the next best area to live in, and where we could actually create developments that people really enjoy. And for me, when I go and visit one of my projects, and I can see the reaction of my residents, whether it's seniors or whether it's regular multifamily, workforce housing, or whether it's student, off-campus student housing, we're focusing on delivering them a product that they can't get, normally in the market. We're focused on affordability across the board, regardless of what their income is. And when you're able to give them a Class A development at a lower price, advantage, to them, and they're still within kind of like the surrounding area where they work, go to school, and where their families, live, it makes a big difference to them. So that keeps, my passion going on an everyday basis. The fact that I can actually make this kind of impact, in these communities. Going back to due diligence, which we know is kind of like the Achilles heel for, most young developers, aspiring developers, burgeoning developers, or even experienced developers. And I know, Jeff, you've seen some developers who, supposedly have been around, the block a few times.
Absolutely.
And the very fundamental and elementary mistakes that they're making, you can't believe it once you're going through the underwriting.
Right.
And so what I'd like, for you guys to do is kind of share, some experience shares related to the due diligence process where people have made missteps that really has costed them the deal because they didn't really follow, the right process in the due diligence process, as they moved along with their project.
Even experienced developers will run into challenges where they miss something. And so part of and you know how this works, Eddie, is that when you work with a lender, they want to help you get there, usually. And so one of the things that I've seen that, I can give you an example where, someone missed the mark on rents. And you're thinking, this is kind of fundamental. And we went in and did our due diligence, offered, looked at the rent comparables in this area, and they said, hey, we're looking at your assumptions. Here's where we're landing. Can you help us out with the differential? Because I want to make sure we're not missing something. And they said, hey, you know what, we were looking at the wrong data set. And so we ended up having to, the deal dynamics changed. There was a deal that ultimately got done. But sometimes even something as fundamental as that, or even on an acquisition, where you have someone miss the mark and they say, oh, my taxes on this acquisition are going to be here. And it's like, well, what they didn't do is they didn't call the municipality and say, okay, if I acquire this asset and it was last sold at 5 million, it's being sold at 10 million, what's the dynamic? What's the mill rate? And what that calculation looks like. And things like that can fundamentally alter the deal, what they can buy it and what they can actually finance the deal for.
That's interesting you say that. I mean, that really takes me back at least 20 plus years ago on a deal that I did in South Carolina as it relates to property taxes. So I was underwriting the project, and typically, okay, you look at trending, got all the information you talked about, the millage rate and everything, and what taxes were in comparable properties. And I was like, okay, I'm good to go, analyze it based on my deal. But what I did, and I trended it at 3% growth every year, just to be safe over a 30-year pro forma.
Right.
Just to find out, what I didn't know is that in that city, that town, they actually really didn't do reassessments, but for every 5 years.
Right.
So I was looking at numbers, I went back 3 years, I was like, oh, this is fine, the tax growth is not that much, it's pretty nominal. So at 3%, I should be golden over a 30-year period of time. And so had I gone back more than 5-6 years, I would have seen that the tax increase based on a reassessment of all the real estate in that area was more like 35 to 40% increase, which means over 5 years, I would have done just 15% across the board.
Right.
Here, it was 35 to 40% increase, and it just pretty much just destroyed the deal. So it's interesting that you bring that up,
Well, I've found that there's a difference between the way the lender does due diligence and the developer does due diligence. And I can tell you, I've made a few mistakes along that line. And so when I was coming up, they said, well, when you give it to the lender, it better be with a bow on it. And I didn't really understand what that meant until I started to look all the things I got to do. So you got valuation, market studies, all those things. And I said, that's a lot of work. But one of the most important things is to walk the neighborhood. And if you don't walk that neighborhood and get your own impression of it, you can't really understand what's going on. And so I know a lot of guys that will not even walk a neighborhood and go inside a restaurant and say, how you doing, what's going on? They find more, give me more information about what the city council's probably worried about than I can if I talk to anybody in the city hall. And so a lot of that comes from the fact that if we really kind of get our boots on the ground, that's going to help us out. And I've made those mistakes where I thought I got a commissioner's vote and he didn't want to vote for me. But I hadn't talked to the local business owners and they wanted something different. So there's a lot of things that come up in the way we do business from our perspective as a developer and what the lender's going to look for in terms of credit and underwriting. We're still looking at, can we get this approved through the city council? And I can tell you that one vote is making a difference.
That's right. Most developers like to look at what their due diligence requirements are, what they like to set for themselves, as opposed to what's underwritable with the lender or the capital investor, which is very interesting. You know, for me, I practice the same thing, and I spend time understanding that neighborhood and that community that we're developing in. Even when if it's out of state, I will spend the night and make sure that I am getting a good knowledge of what's happening within that community, whether it's with the waste management folks, going to the local bars, talking to the teachers, talking to people at the park just randomly about what's happening in that community, where their pressure points are, will be key in helping you shape, your deal. So when you go through these tough questions in an underwriting, you can answer them right there on the spot. And people like the Jeffs of the world can say, wow, I mean, Eddy's done his due diligence. He is up to speed on what's going on with this project. There's nothing we've thrown to him that he can't respond. The market feasibility study, he can challenge it, and say that they weren't as thorough as we were. So that is very critical. I'd also, love to, just leave the audience, I mean, we can sit here and talk all day. I mean, we're developers and all these experiences and battle wounds and stripes and whatnot. But if there's, a couple of takeaways or giveaways, you would leave them with, today, what would it be, Jim?
So number one, we do 4 walls. We don't do what's inside the 4 walls. So whether it's a home or a business, we help create that and create success. So our best thank you is their success. Number 2, watch out for who you sit next to, because you and I met each other at a conference years ago, and I was in the back row all by myself. And you came and sat down and introduced yourself. And we've been friends and colleagues for a long, long time. And that is important. Those relationships that you make out of the blue, you never know. And lastly, you got 2 passions in life: the things you love to do and the people that love you. And if you don't have equilibrium, that's your definition of success. You can have all the money in the world, you can get all the awards in the world, but I can tell you right now, that balance is important. And that's why we keep doing it, because we can make it balance and we love what we do.
Jeff.
So I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, because I think we have an audience that's trying to learn and gain something, so try to keep it as simple as possible. So I mentioned the 3 C's of credit. So collateral, cash flow, character, okay? Collateral really just means, what are you building? Where are you building it at? All the things we're talking about, real estate is still about location, location, location. That still means something. Cash flow, understanding your rent structure, understanding expenses, understanding, why these things make sense, supporting that case, building that case. And then character. When you come to a lender or you're coming to people, you have to have your story about, especially if you're new. People will welcome new folks, but you've got to come with your story. And if you need to bring and enhance your story, to bring an Eddy Benoit, to bring someone to the table who has some experience. We all start from someplace. Sometimes we need a little help, and we need to reach out to folks, especially when we have a viable transaction. So
I agree with that.
Definitely. The one thing I would say, in this business, you have to humble yourself and learn how to ask for help. No one knows it all. No developer knows everything about development. People still ask me for advice who've been doing this for 30 and 40 years. and I'm asking them for advice as well.
You're right about that. You know, for us, you know, we typically, when somebody brings us a deal and they're new at this game, you know, I'll ask them a few questions, and which is the same questions I'll ask anybody about a deal that they're presenting to us, that they're enamored with. Like, number one, you know, why is your deal so great? Okay. Number two, why do you think you are qualified to be that developer for this deal? You know, those are very, very interesting, you know, questions. Never ask them about money or the deal dynamics. Ask them, you know, why is your deal a differentiator? Because you're talking about doing another multifamily deal. Well, there's about 10 other deals, you know, in the surrounding market, and there are another 10 that are in planning. And then the last one is, you know, why do you think this deal will be, you know, a benefit to the community? If you're not able to answer these questions, you know, for me on the front end, and you're stumbling on them, and you just continue to go towards the financial reward of the deal, or performance, or opportunity, and whatnot, it tells me real quick, you know, where your mindset is. That you're focused on the end game, the result of the game, the win, without ever understanding that you've got, well, all you have to go through in order to get to that point. And to me, those are very germane to the due diligence process as it relates to those 4 whys. Guys, I really, really am thankful for you guys joining me today, you know, for this show. I mean, we can talk about due diligence all day long, but it really, you know, warms my heart that you agree to join us here. But even more so, you know, just to share, you know, your experience, your background, and some of these nuggets with, you know, our audience here. I mean, we're definitely equipping them with some good information here, even though I know we're just kind of just, you know, giving a little taste, but some of the information that we talked about today will definitely help them put their deals together in a better way, or approach it a little bit different, you know, as they shape their next deal. So thank you for joining us today on Shape the Deal. Definitely looking forward to talking to you guys on our next episode. It's been great. Man, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks a lot.
It's been great, man.
Absolutely.
Good seeing you.
Thank you.